Hello everyone, my name is Haylee Griffith and I'm a graduate student at Arizona State University. This presentation is to inform you of the lack of proper nutrition and education for incarcerated pregnant women. This project was worked on by myself, Christina Hattler, Dara Jefferson, and Mariah Netter. This presentation is directed to Charles Ryan, who is the director of the Arizona Department of Corrections. The purpose of directing this presentation to Mr. Ryan is in hopes that with him being very top of the Arizona Department of Corrections, he will be able to implement policies and procedures to properly address the dire need for proper nutritional education and prenatal education for incarcerated pregnant women. So, the first thing I want you guys to do is I want you all to close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you are sitting in a courtroom and the judge has just handed down their sentence of 5 years to be served in the Department of Corrections. You get up, you are taken with the deputy into the holding cell, and the last thing that you see before that door closes are the eyes of your 2 small children. Now, fast forward about a couple weeks and you are taken into the holding cell at the state prison and you just kind of feel like something's off. So you decide to ask the nurse to perform a pregnancy test, and those 2 little pink lines show up. You can open your eyes now. When I do this, I immediately am overcome by grief, by guilt, and I'm overwhelmed. Not sure what emotions you guys would tie to that experience, but it just sounds so overwhelming. And unfortunately, this is a position that many women find themselves in all across America and the Department of Corrections all over the country. Unfortunately, we actually don't know how many women face this situation. According to the Pregnancy in Prison Project, there are no hard data to tell us how many abortions, how many miscarriages, or how many childbirths are done or that happen within the jails or prisons within the United States. The local jails and state prisons do not have to report to anyone of these kind of statistics. They don't have anybody to report to how many pregnant women are within their facilities, what kind of care that is being performed with them, anything of that nature. So it's just data that's not there. So the Pregnancy in Prison Project was created in 2015. And it is out of Johns Hopkins University, and that's the exact data that they're trying to find. They're trying to find out how many women in prison aren't pregnant, and so we can actually get an accurate amount so we can figure out how best to serve this very special prison population. So why is this important? Why focus on, what most would deem a very small portion of the prison population in the United States? And the reason to focus on this is because it's growing. The number of incarcerated women has increased tremendously in the last 3 decades. In the 1980s, the rise of incarcerated women was, pretty crazy. The number of women grew faster than the amount of men, and it actually is still multiplying faster. So still to this day, the number of women who are incarcerated, that number rate is going up significantly more than the number of men who are being incarcerated on a daily rate. So it's not to say that the number of women in a total is higher than the number of men who are incarcerated in the United States. That's not accurate. What it's stating is the rate in which women are being incarcerated is increasing faster than the rate that men are being incarcerated. This can be seen in the statistics. So in 1986, there was about 19,000 women incarcerated. And that sounds like a pretty big number, but then you have to also think about the number of women within a population. And so that's still pretty small. And 19,000 is a large number, but in comparison to the number of women within the United States, it's a pretty small number. That number jumped to 115,000 in 2009. So there you can see the massive increase within that time. And now today, so roughly a little less than 10 years, 9 years later, there are currently over 1 million women that are being held in correctional facilities between jail, state prisons, and federal prisons. That number is massive. And of that 1 million, 75% of those women are mothers. So 75% of the 1 million people being held in local jails, state prisons, and federal prisons have children. The number of women in prison has grown by over 800% in the last 3 decades, and nearly 2/3 of women in prison are mothers, and this is according to the Women's Prison Association. So prisons have changed. Prisons were originally designed for men. They were meant to house men. They were meant to, the facilities were designed around men inmates. And now, those same facilities that were meant to house men are now housing a great deal of women. And unfortunately, those facilities were never meant to house women, and so it is causing a huge strain on those facilities. Women have a myriad of differences, physical, mental, emotional differences than men, and those differences are causing the correctional facilities to, basically redesign and have to rethink of how they're going to properly care for all of these women. For example, correctional facilities are now required to care for women's premenstrual syndrome, menstruation, and to hand out and dispense sanitary items to help deal with those on a monthly basis. These are all natural parts of being a woman. Women within the community go through these types of things every day, and it's not really a second thought. However, when over a million of these women are being housed in correctional facilities, this is now a problem or an issue that the correctional system has to address. And it's an issue that they never really had to address on this massive scale before. Women are also more likely to seek psychiatric treatment and medication for these diagnoses than men are. The correctional system is then responsible for not only paying for the inmate's medication that they may be prescribed to treat their different mental health diagnoses, but they're also responsible for paying for the ongoing psychiatric care and also administering the mental health medications. And because women are more likely to seek this psychiatric care, that's a lot more cost that's put onto the correctional facilities, the correctional system, than the men's side, who are less likely to seek psychiatric care. Women are also more likely to be diagnosed and treated for things such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And all three of those diagnoses usually are accompanied by either, intense therapy or counseling and or medication. And while these women are incarcerated, it is then the correctional system's responsibility to meet those healthcare standards. So here's the problem. Pregnant women make up anywhere between 4% to 30% of women entering the correctional system, depending on the level of incarceration. Right now, there are no public policies addressing prenatal care or education for pregnant incarcerated women that are available for public review by the Arizona Department of Corrections. There is nothing that you can search for or call and ask about to find out what the policies are on how the Arizona Department of Corrections handles their pregnant female inmates. And according to studies, there is a lack of proper nutrition and education for pregnant inmates within the Arizona Department of Correction. So, with the statistic that between 4% and 30% of women entering the correctional system are impregnated or are pregnant, this depends on the level of incarceration. The idea is that at the jail, the local jail level, the level of pregnant females is higher than the percentage of women who are pregnant who are in state or federal facilities. However, we don't know this, as the Pregnancy in Prison Project has identified. There's not a governing body that requires any of state, local, or federal prisons or jails to record or report that information. Right now, with their project, it's only a volunteer basis in which 22 states are being have volunteered to be a part of. With pregnancy behind bars, most state prisons are receiving failing grades for their prenatal nutrition and education policies. Pregnancy behind bars is also an exclusive female issue that the correctional system has to handle. This is something that, prior to all of these women being incarcerated, they didn't really have to address as much on such a large scale as they do now. Ultimately, because the numbers of women being incarcerated is so high, the likelihood that these women are pregnant upon intake into the prison system or jail system is higher. And so now, once they're brought into the correctional facility, it is up to that correctional facility to care for them. There are specific guidelines that are set by the United States Department of Health and Human Services that a pregnant woman has to receive as basic health care. These basic requirements, these standards outline certain nutritional guidelines, certain physical guidelines, and certain educational guidelines that these women have a basic right to. And unfortunately, most women who are incarcerated at the time of their pregnancy are not receiving this basic care, which is a human health care, basic right violation. Like many other states in the United States, Arizona is failing. The Arizona Department of Corrections has received an F for their prenatal and education programming within their prison facilities. The only policy that was available for public review that could be found was the Department of Corrections shackling policy for pregnant inmates. And unfortunately, when you attempt to view that policy, it is no longer available for public review. It cannot be found anywhere. Any phone calls that have been attempted to be made have gone unanswered. And this is a problem. This is not okay that there are no policies and procedures available for public review, because ultimately the Department of Corrections is funded by the people, and the people who pay their tax dollars in order to pay for these prisons should be able to have access to certain types of information. And I believe that knowing the standard of care in which pregnant inmates are receiving while in those facilities is one of those parts of information that should be public. With the shackling policies, for those who are unaware of what that means, it's basically outlining what is appropriate and inappropriate types of handcuffing or restraining a pregnant inmate while they are pregnant and while they are giving birth. So, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services states that a woman should not be shackled or handcuffed while giving birth, and they should also not be shackled or handcuffed around the ankles while pregnant and being transported. And the reason for this is because it causes and it poses a safety risk for the unborn child. When a pregnant female is shackled around the ankles, waist, and wrists, or handcuffed around the ankles, waist, and wrist, it poses a tripping hazard. And because of the way that they are shackled, the women are then unable to catch themselves in a proper way that would prevent them from falling basically straight on their stomach. And obviously this can have detrimental effects on the unborn child and also the mother's health if for whatever reason that fall causes the placenta to detach or things like that. It's putting both the mother and the child's health at risk. Another shackling policy that the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has deemed not okay is the fact that some departments of corrections were having the mothers handcuffed to the bed railing while giving birth. And this can pose a health risk because not only is the mother unable to move in ways that they might need to while birthing, it also can cause higher stress levels while the mother is giving birth and things of that nature. And higher stress levels can cause higher pain levels, and then also higher stress levels can be then cause higher stress levels in the unborn child. And if the stress levels of the unborn child reach a certain rate, then a C-section has to be performed. And this causes even more risk, more health risk, more risk of the mother dying, things of that nature. And so that is why the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has deemed it basically not okay, inhumane. This policy, they should not be handcuffed or shackled to the bed while giving birth. Because there was lack of set policies for public review for Arizona, 2 other states were reviewed to see what kind of programs and information was available on those programs that they have set in place. Pennsylvania state prison system was one of the only state prison system that received passing grades on the review of prenatal and education programs. And with that, they have this program called the Mom-Mobile. And what this program does is it provides prenatal health and education to incarcerated mothers, and then also case management services for up to a year after release. The reason that this program is so innovative, and it's really something that all states should follow and look to for the standard of pregnant inmate care, is it provides that prenatal health and education. So this is the first piece, right? It allows the inmate, the pregnant inmate, to have an informed health care decision about what they want to happen to their body. They are given all their options. They are not only given all their options, but then also given all the resources that will be able to help with those options. So if that inmate decides that they want to have an abortion, then those resources are given. If they decide that they want to have the baby and place it for adoption, those resources are given. If the inmate decides that they want to have the baby and then, have a family member, put it in foster care with a family member until they are released, then those information are given. And so it really allows the inmate to have informed consent as far as what happens, not only with her own health care as far as, the birthing process and the nutrition and everything like that, but also, for just the pregnancy in general. The second part of this that's pretty significant is the case management piece. So, statistics show across the board that when an inmate is released, the first year is the most stressful. And this is not unique between men and women. For both genders, if they have been incarcerated for any amount of time, the first year is the most significant, because if they can get through the first year, then their likelihood of being rearrested or reincarcerated goes down, significantly goes down. With this, women have a very significant higher stress because, like I said before, most women, when they are incarcerated, 75% of them are mothers, and of that 75%, most, if not all, are primary caregivers of those children. So when they are released from prison, they are now being thrust back into a primary parenting role. They have to not only get used to living in the community and not under this institution that tells them when to eat, what to wear, all of these things, but then they also have to care for these little lives that they've created. And that's a significant different amount of stress all on its own. So the case management piece of the Mom-Mobile helps these mothers transition back into the community, not only to kind of deinstitutionalize them, but also properly prepare them to be healthy, positive, pro-social parents, in which they probably weren't before. And this is significant because that in itself is going to reduce recidivism. Another state that was reviewed was Illinois, and the Illinois Department of Corrections mandates that all incarcerated mothers attend a parenting class no matter their security level. So if no matter whether they're being held in a minimum security all the way up to maximum security prison, it is a requirement for anyone entering into the Department of Corrections, if they are a parent, if they are a mother, they have to attend a parenting class. And this is significant because this, again, kind of like the Mom Mobile does in Pennsylvania, this is giving information of positive parenting, healthy coping skills, things that these women may not have had access to before. And this, in learning these skills, in hopes that when they are released, they'll use these skills, will reduce the rate in which they reoffend, and that's the whole goal. Again, unfortunately, Arizona has no policies that we are allowed to review, and so if they are doing something that's as significant as the Pennsylvania State Prison System or the Illinois Department of Corrections, no one knows about it. So where should Arizona start? The first place to start would be having written policies that comply with not only the standards of care as outlined in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, but also that align with the National Commission of Correctional Health Care. The reason that they need to align with both is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that's just like the basic health care. That's for everyone, no special cases, things of that nature. The National Commission of Correctional Health Care adds another level of it, and there are specific outlines and specific policies that are for pregnant women as set by them. And so that's significant, that those need to be followed on top of the basic health care rights that every inmate should be receiving. The next step would be to require pregnancy tests for all female inmates during intake in all Arizona jails and prisons. So this is significant because if a woman is taken into intake in a local jail, she is being taken straight from the community into a correctional facility, and she might not know that she's pregnant at the time. So depending on how long she stays there, if she stays there for say 3 months, well, the first 3 months in pregnancy are the most critical. That's when all of the things that need to be formed are being formed, and that's when the prenatal vitamins are so important. And if she has no idea that she's pregnant, none of those nutritional guidelines are going to be being met. And so that's why it's so imperative that even at the jail level, those pregnancy tests are being taken, because then even if she's only there for 2 months, if she finds out she's pregnant in jail, she can then prepare herself, get the information that she needs, get those educational classes, things like that, so she can make an informed decision of what she wants to do about this pregnancy when she's released back into the community. It's also very important that it's done at the prison level as well, because although some women are transferred straight from the local jails into the Arizona Department of Corrections, some women are not. Some women are taken into custody on their sentencing day, in which they have been in the community for months prior. And it's very similar. They could not know that they're pregnant. They might have no idea that they are now fostering this new life inside of them until they feel a little funny a couple weeks down the road. And because of this, for the same reasons that it's important for the women who are entering the jail facilities, it's important for the women who are entering the prison facilities because they have most likely a lot longer to be incarcerated, and so they need to have all of the information available to them so they can make an informed decision of how they want to proceed with this pregnancy. Following the results, if the pregnancy test is positive, a proper education and nutritional plan should be set in place for each individual inmate by a licensed medical professional. This is important because everyone's different. If that pregnancy test is positive, then they need to be seen by a licensed medical professional, and they need to go over their pregnancy history with that person. A proper nutritional guideline needs to be set because everyone's nutritional needs are different, and everyone's medical needs are different as well. So if this woman, if she finds out she's pregnant upon intake at the prison, this could be her 4th pregnancy, but she's only has 1 previous child, where the other 3 have been miscarriages. And that's important for her to be able to discuss with a licensed medical professional, because her pregnancy might be at a higher risk for miscarriage, and that's something that not only she needs to be aware of, but also the prison facility needs to be aware of that as well, because if she's more likely to miscarriage in the middle of the night, they need to be aware of those things prior to just putting her in general population. So the last part, step number 3, is the follow-through. This is where, everyone who tests positive after talking to the licensed medical professional is given all of that up-to-date education on their pregnancy, all of their options, all of their resources, everything of that nature. Providing a prenatal education class is imperative. All women, no matter what stage of pregnancy they're in, need to receive this education. They need to be able to make an informed decision upon their medical rights and their medical decisions. To follow this, all correctional facilities should hire an outside agency to come in and teach a class several times a week for pregnant inmates and those who are mothers. So this should not just be limited to those who are pregnant at the time, but those who are going to be facing that parental stress when they are released from the facility. Very similar to the Pennsylvania State Prison System's Mom-Mobile. These women need that educational portion as well, and so that should be extended to them as well as those who are currently pregnant. The classes should focus on providing up-to-date information, proper education, and nutritional guides. Facilities should make sure that all mothers and pregnant inmates can attend at least 1 class a week, and this should be regardless of supervision level. So whether it's a minimum security prison, maximum security prison, anything in between, this should be all across the board, just like it is in Illinois. All of these women should be able to have this education and be able to have that informed information so they can make an informed decision about their health care needs and decisions prior to making any of those decisions, because that's a basic human right. That's what they deserve. Whether they're incarcerated or not, they deserve to be able to make an informed educational decision upon their health care. So in summary, with the increase of pregnant incarcerated women, the need for updated programs is imperative. Without proper nutrition and education, unborn babies and their mothers are at risk for unhealthy pregnancies, which can be detrimental to both of them. The medical care for women needs to include, but is not limited to in any way, the prenatal care, which includes the education and nutritional portions, proper menstrual care, and then also proper mental health care. The Arizona Department of Corrections has an opportunity to make significant changes in these women's lives, and in result, their children's lives and their families' lives. So this impact does not just impact the incarcerated woman. This impacts their children who are outside of the facility in others' care, the unborn child that the mother is carrying, and also the incarcerated woman's family, because if they are given the proper education of how to deal with these stressors, the proper parenting education, things of that nature, when they're released, that transition is going to go so much smoother, and it's going to ultimately benefit society in a whole. And that's the goal, is to benefit these women who unfortunately have made poor choices and have found themselves incarcerated, and now they found out that they're pregnant, getting them the proper education and nutritional resources so they can make proper informed decisions upon their health care, so that when they are released, they can be productive members of society. That is the goal. And the Arizona Department of Corrections can make this happen if they implement proper policies and procedures in order to do so. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.